everybody. Welcome so much to our kind of impromptu bonus Fabulous Friday. This is going to be the last one before the holiday season really begins. And I am here unexpectedly today. I don't look like Andy. Andy normally would give these introductions, but she had a kind of a family emergency. So I am stepping in, and I do hope that I can do this justice. So for those who don't know me, my name is Lena Cordia. I am now the curator here at Buffalo County Historical Society and the Trails and Rails Museum. And before we begin, I just want to acknowledge and thank the support of Humanities Nebraska and also the Nebraska Cultural Endowment for supporting the speaker series and allowing us to bring in today's speaker. And then before I introduce her and kind of talk about the structure of today, I just want to give a couple of museum updates as well while we're here. As you can see, Christmas has arrived at the museum. We are going to finish up all of our decorations for the Christmas tree walk this week. We're going to be closed all of next week for Thanksgiving, and then when we reopen not next Thursday, but the Thursday after, December 4th, is Give Where You Live, and we're going to have a community open house that day. Old Man Winter will be here at the museum, available for visits with the very young and the old. And then we will kind of kick off our Christmas tree walk that following Saturday on December 6th, and that will run every day from December 6th through December 14th. So we encourage you to come, get some tickets, vote for your favorite trees. This year's theme is Keeping Score, so it's been generally sports and recreation themed all year long, hence today's speaker. So today we will go ahead and I'll introduce our speaker. She will present. There will be some time for question and answers at the end, so please do keep your questions and be ready. But also we do have some evaluation forms that you're highly encouraged to fill out. This gives great feedback to not only us, but also Humanities Nebraska for their program. So with that, since you didn't come here to listen to me, oops, where is it? There it is. So today's speaker is Debra White, who is a native Nebraskan, and as a graduate of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and a former Yell Squad member, her education and college experience led her toward a path of gratitude and a desire to give back to the university. In doing so, she developed her passion for history and research, concentrating on the UNL Athletic Department and Spirit Squad, where her love lies. Her belief in education led her to the University of Texas at Austin, where she works in the College of Education, Institute for Public School Initiatives. She is also a real estate broker in Austin, Texas. The Spirit of Nebraska is her first book, and she currently lives in Austin, Texas, but the distance does not deter her from returning to Memorial Stadium in the fall. She may not be wearing the cherished red and white wool sweater or saddle shoes or waving pom-poms on the sidelines, but her voice is just as loud as it was on the field with the Yell Squad cheering on her beloved Cornhuskers. So please give a round of applause for Debra.
Well, thank you, Lena, and I want to thank Andy and the museum for inviting me to be here today, and thank you all for coming. I'm here to talk about the extraordinary life of a trailblazing Nebraska woman, Louise Pound. But first I thought I would tell you a little bit about myself and my connection to Louise. As Lena mentioned, I was on the UNL Yell Squad from 1977 through 1980. That's me there in the corner. A friend of mine that I was on the squad with, one day she called me up and she was all excited, and she said, "Deb, you won't believe what I saw today." She was in Omaha walking past an antique store, and this program was prominently displayed in the front window, and there was a sign above the program that said, "Featured Antique of the Week." So now I guess I'm an official antique and I can talk about history. I'm a native Nebraskan on both sides of my family. My family roots go way back into pioneering in Nebraska and homesteading. However, through all those generations, nobody in my family had ever gone to college. So I was the first in my family to graduate from UNL. I graduated from Seward High School, and I didn't have the funds to go to college. So after high school, I moved to Lincoln and I started working. Early that fall, I had never seen a Husker football game before. I didn't know anything about it, and early that fall, I went to my first Husker football game after I graduated from high school. Once I stepped inside that stadium, it just transformed me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, that sea of red, the cheerleaders, the band, and by the time I left that football game, I knew I had to attend the University of Nebraska and be on the cheer squad. I don't know, I just felt it. I knew I had to do that. So as I was leaving the stadium, there was a cheerleader leaving the stadium, and I didn't know it at the time, but her nickname was Jonesy, and she's wearing a red and white striped uniform, her saddle shoes, carrying her palms. And I stood there frozen, and I just walked from the stadium towards campus until I couldn't see her anymore. And the only thing I could think of was, wow, what must it feel like to walk in her shoes? Because I was still all excited from that game. So several years later, I'm having lunch with a couple of my friends. We're talking about something, and the one said, you know, Deb, when you tried out, Jonesy was the captain of the squad. She was a senior, and all the senior captains would be on the committee to select the new members coming in. And she said, Jonesy fought for you. She wanted someone just a little taller to take her place on the squad. So I got to walk in her shoes after all. So after that first Husker game, I did not enter right away. I started working 2 jobs over the next 3 years so I could save money to attend UNL. So I entered UNL in 1976 and then made the cheer squad in 77. My college experience created this love and gratitude for UNL, and I made it my life's mission to give back. I decided I wanted to volunteer and do research for the university and the athletic department. So while I was doing my research, I was finding lots of interesting things out that I didn't know and my friends didn't know. So I decided that I wanted to share it with Husker fans. So in 2002, I started writing a book, and it's called The Spirit of Nebraska, A History of Husker Game Day Traditions, the Tunnel Walk, Mascots, Cheer, and more. And Tom Osborne wrote the foreword to the book, so I thought I would share with you how I got Tom to write the foreword. I simply emailed him, and I couldn't believe it. That day, he wrote me right back, and he said, I don't think I'm the one for the job because I don't know anything about cheerleading. So I thought, okay, that makes sense. So I wrote him back and I said, well, there's just one chapter on cheerleading. There's a chapter on football, on the mascots, how the Cornhusker fans became known as the best fans in college football. And so he wrote me back and he said, well, send me a few chapters, I'll read it and I'll think about it. Well, 3 days went by and I didn't get a yes or no answer. He emailed me his whole foreword. It was amazing. He's such a generous man. Later, when I talked to Tom, he had read the book and he said he learned a lot. So I was really happy about that because that was my goal for writing the book, to share information with Husker fans. Also, a funny story about this picture. I went to see Tom at his teammate offices, and at that time, he was located in a bank. And I went over the lunch hour, and we decided we were going to take our picture. Well, there's no one in his offices, so he said, well, follow me. So we walked to the lobby of the bank, and there's a lady standing in line waiting for a teller. He walks up, taps her on the shoulder, and she turned around and just gasped. She couldn't believe it. And so the picture's a little blurry because she was shaking so bad when she took the picture. How many people here know who Louise Pound is? Okay, a few. Well, I am not related to Louise. In fact, I had never heard of her until 2002 when I started researching for my book. Once I learned about Louise, I was so shocked that by all of her accomplishments and that she was such a superhuman woman. And so it became my mission to find out more about her. Okay, let's see if I can get that. Okay, good. A building implosion happened on the University of Nebraska campus on December 22nd, 2017, sending Cather Pound dormitories into a cloud of dust. Many on campus are familiar with the famous novelist Willa Cather and the dorm that was named after her, but I soon realized that very few people knew of Louise Pound. The university named a new cafeteria after Willa, but nothing was planned for Louise Pound. When I read about the upcoming demolition, I got this terrible feeling that Louise would just be wiped off campus and forever forgotten about. And I knew I couldn't let that happen. Pound Dormitory was named after Louise, an outstanding scholar, athlete, UNL instructor, and professor for 50 years. When I heard that nothing was going to be done to honor Louise, I contacted the chancellor's office about my concerns, and that spearheaded an effort in continuing to honor the incomparable Pound on the UNL campus. The Board of Regents approved in 2018 of the renaming of the College of Business Administration building to Louise Pound Hall. So that's the College of Business there in the middle. And the lower left, that's Cather Pound Hall, which there's nothing there any longer. Who is Louise Pound, and why is her name worthy of being placed on a building on campus? Actually, she's had now 2 buildings named after her, and that's rare for anybody to have a building named after him, let alone 2. Her real name is Emma Louise Pound, who preferred to be known as Louise or Miss Pound, and she was born in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1872. She passed away in Lincoln in 1958. During her lifetime, Pound was an advocate for women's rights and opportunities. She was a distinguished literary scholar, folklorist, linguist, author, musician, and a championship athlete, and a University of Nebraska professor of English for 50 years. Pound was strong, independent, brilliant, and an athlete. She was a championship athlete who proudly represented the University of Nebraska, the city of Lincoln, the state of Nebraska, and the U.S. in tennis. And she was also a championship golfer, cyclist, and basketball player. In her early life, Louise's parents were Stephen Pound and Laura Biddlecombe Pound, who they married in New York in 1869. Prior to their marriage, her mother Laura attended Lombard College in Galesburg, Illinois, and it was one of the few colleges at that time that admitted women. So as newlyweds, the Pounds moved from the East Coast to seek opportunity on the Western Plains as early pioneers in the new city of Lincoln. They were one of the first few people that lived in Lincoln. They were members of Lincoln's elite society. Stephen was a lawyer, judge, and a state senator. They resided at 1632 L Street in Lincoln, and at one point the home was demolished, and the location is currently the parking lot of Tico's restaurant. Both Louise and her sister Olivia lived at home during their careers and continued living there after their parents passed away, and they lived there in the family home for the remainder of their lives. The Pounds had 3 children, a son Roscoe and 2 daughters, Louise and Olivia. When raising her daughters, Laura ignored the medical profession's advice of taxing their brains with math and science and to avoid sports so they wouldn't harm their reproductive organs. That was a thing back then. Their parents encouraged competition between the siblings and fueled an interest and participation in sports. Louise was raised to be an equal to her brother, and that stemmed from their Quaker heritage, which believed in educating both boys and girls. That was not the norm at the time. Laura Pound homeschooled her 3 children, and that was also a new concept. Laura installed a blackboard in their formal living room, which shocked her friends and neighbors. Formal living rooms were supposed to be reserved for social entertaining. The children were encouraged to interact with visiting adults and dignitaries who visited the family home, even though that was against the prevailing social Victorian expectations, which at the time children were expected to be seen and not heard. Even though Louise can stand on her own, I want to quickly talk about her brother Roscoe, because as Louise's older brother, he had this impact and influence on her. As siblings, they had an early competitive relationship which carried on at the University of Nebraska. When Roscoe was creating organizations for male students, Louise was right there, making sure that women had the same opportunities. Roscoe had a photographic memory. He knew 9 languages, and at the age of 77, he learned Mandarin Chinese in 6 weeks so he could discuss the legal system with the leader of China. He had 3 degrees from UNL, a bachelor's in botany, a master's in botany, and a PhD in botany. He was the first person to receive a PhD at the University of Nebraska. After receiving his master's degree, he left Nebraska and attended Harvard Law School for 1 year. But he had to leave Harvard. He never got his law degree, and he returned to Lincoln after his father became ill. Even though he did not have a law degree, in 1900, he helped organize the Nebraska Bar Association, and he was dean of the UNL Law School for 4 years, and he was dean of the Harvard Law School for 20 years. And he was considered one of the nation's leading legal experts of his time, and he didn't have a law degree. Wow. Considering all of his amazing accomplishments, he would often make this statement: "Around Nebraska, I'm known as Louise Pound's brother." From the time UNL first opened their doors in 1871, so that's the city of Lincoln, and there's the UNL campus. In 1871, women were allowed academic entrance and equality in education, which that was rare at the time because there were very few universities that even allowed women. Even though this was progressive, it still did not mean that women had the same opportunities as the male students. Louise entered the University of Nebraska's 2-year preparatory school in 1886 at the age of 14, and then she was a freshman at 16. She was 5'5", petite, and a ball of energy. She did not fit the Victorian mold. She was impatient, competitive, intense, a woman who wasn't afraid to break barriers, play by her own rules, and speak her mind. Mentally and physically, she was a force to be reckoned with in Lincoln and on the university campus. Pound graduated with her bachelor's degree in 4 years in 1892, and she received a degree of Bachelor's of Letters and a degree in music. Then after earning her bachelor's degree, Pound was awarded the Phi Beta Kappa key she was one of the first members in the newly formed chapter on the UNL campus. Now, she had a Latin inscription on the back of her key. When it was translated, it said, "Let the boys go back and sit down." This is her university degree, and it's the only place where her real formal name is located. It's the only place it can be found. In 1895, she graduated with her master's degree and became an assistant instructor in the English department. Her master's degree was in philology, which is the study of languages and their historical origins and meanings. Also, she had a degree in piano, music theory, and harmony. At the turn of the 20th century, one of the unwritten considerations for admission to a graduate program was based on gender, making it difficult for women to get accepted and continue their educations and careers. It was hard to go to a university to get a degree in the first place, but then to further that education, they thought, why should they? They wouldn't let women in because they're expected to get married and just care for their home. Pound found this to be true when she tried. No one would accept her into a doctoral program in the United States, so she went to the University of Heidelberg in Germany to get her doctorate. Now, it usually takes a minimum of 7 semesters to get a PhD. She completed her PhD in 2 semesters. All the while, she had to become proficient in the German language because she had to present her dissertation in German, and she graduated magna cum laude. Her dissertation was titled "The Comparison of Adjectives in English in the 15th and 16th Century." She was the first female at UNL to go on and earn her PhD, which she received in 1900, and she was one of the first female professors in the United States. Pound was the author of 12 books and many, many articles. During her university years, Louise developed many strong-liked friendships. Louise enjoyed having a good time, socializing, parties, music, playing bridge with her friends, theater, and dancing. She attracted the attention of men on campus, and she captured the attention of Willa Cather, and they became very quick friends. They were both university students, intellectuals with similar interests. Even though they had similar interests, they were also very different. Cather displayed a masculine demeanor and was intrigued by Louise's strong athletic side. Willa styled her hair in a short cut and wore boyish clothes. Both women were close to their brothers, and they rejected traditional female roles. The women remained close friends from 1891 to 1894. Both Louise's brother Roscoe and Willa were very strong-willed, outspoken personalities, and there was always tension between them. It is unknown what caused Willa to strike out, but in 1894 she wrote a damaging article in the school newspaper about Roscoe. The entire Pound family banded together, and Willa was no longer allowed in the Pound home. Louise's loyalty to her family was her top priority, and she ended her association with Willa. As Louise was becoming a young woman and entering UNL in 1888, it was a time entrenched in the Victorian era. To understand the social morals that encircled women during that time period, let's take a little closer look at the Victorian views throughout the United States to compare the time she lived in and the obstacles she faced. Women at that time were considered delicate, fragile, their clothing was restrictive, it was considered inappropriate to show their ankles. Women did not have the right to vote, they could not own property. Once women who married, they were not allowed to work, and expected to care for their home and family. When a woman married, her rights were given over to her husband and she was considered his property. Any kind of physical activity, especially sports, was frowned upon and was thought to damage reproductive organs. And this was nationally a common concern in the medical profession. During Victorian times, the medical profession had strong beliefs which were incorrect about women's health. A popular medical doctor who is considered the father of neurology is Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell. He once stated that young women, and I quote, future womanly usefulness was endangered by the steady use of her brain. And then in 1887, a senator named George Vest expressed his views on women in the workforce, stating, I do not believe that the greater intelligence ever intended them to invade the sphere of work given to men, tearing down and destroying all the best influences for which God intended them. Women are essentially emotional. It is no disparagement to them. They are so. So this is the time that Louise lived in when she was breaking barriers and making a name for herself. Louise established many campus organizations as a student and a professor and was leader of many of these organizations. In 1905, she created the Black Mask, today known as Mortarboard. Are you familiar with Mortarboard? It's a national women's, well now it's mixed, men and women can join it, but back then in 1905 when it was created, it was a National Honor Society that you can apply for and then you can join. So, and in 1904 she made sure female students would have their own separate cheering sections in the stadium and not to have to rely on being escorted by men to attend football games. In 1916 she formed a suffrage club on campus supporting the right for women to vote. In the beginning of cheerleading in the late 1800s at universities, it was only a male activity. And at the University of Nebraska, the male cheerleading was started in 1903. And in 1917, Louise helped establish women cheerleaders on the field next to men cheerleading. Now, in 1917, the University of Nebraska had the first ever female cheerleaders at a university, which I think is pretty cool. So these are the first two males that cheered at Nebraska, and then these were the three that were added to the squad. This is a picture of on the left, it's just women students wearing bloomers to play basketball on campus. Now, this is a picture of when the University of Nebraska women's basketball team became intercollegiate and they played the University of Minnesota. Their outfits are something else that they would play, but those were considered very risque because, you know, they had tights on, but you could still see their ankles. So at times when the University of Nebraska's women's basketball team were playing, male students weren't allowed to see it because it was just too risque.
Game will be scheduled on Tuesday afternoon. No men allowed.
And here, track and field was popular on the university campus, so here we have some hurdlers. In their bloomers. And here we have a pole vaulter. You know, I looked at this picture and I thought, what's she gonna land on? There's no pit or nothing there. Louise held many executive offices in national professional organizations from 1906 to 1955, and her most impressive position was the first woman president of the Distinguished Modern Languages Association. Her accomplishments were just not academic, but in the classroom. She was also an amazing championship athlete. Throughout her lifetime, Louise opened the door for women in sports, broke rules, and set new boundaries while achieving wins, medals, records in a variety of sports. Pound relished athletic competition and had a passion that pushed her to excel and win. According to her brother Roscoe, Louise was great at everything she tried, and she tried everything. Pound first mastered lawn croquet by the age of 14, but she considered it too tame of a sport and found herself drawn to more demanding sports. She claimed tennis to be her favorite sport, and not surprising, she was a championship tennis player, conquering both women and men on the court. Now this is a picture in it's cut off there a little bit, but in 1890, the city of Lincoln opened a new tennis club, and it was for males only, but they allowed Louise to play just because she was the best player in Lincoln, but she could not be a member. In 1890, she was the first City of Lincoln tennis champion. In 1890 and 1891, she was the UNL men's singles champion. And in 1894, she was the UNL men's intercollegiate tennis doubles champion, and she earned a men's varsity letter that year for tennis. So, an interesting story. I did some volunteer work for the athletic department because I don't know if you're familiar, at the football stadium down by the tunnel walk, there's these tiles that have names from 1890 through current of the football players that have lettered in football. Well, they wanted to do something a little similar at the tennis center, and they were going to do a separate women's plaque and a separate men's plaque. And the women's tennis started in 1975, so they had all those records, but they didn't have complete records for the men's since it started in 1894. And so I did research, and I was able to add 44 letter winners. And then later, I heard that the project was done, so I wanted to go see it. And I go over to the tennis center, and the manager over there gave me a tour, and then we went to the plaques. And I saw Louise as the first letter winner in 1894, and I went to take a picture, and he goes, "Oh, I have to tell you something. There's a mistake. That should read Lewis Pound." So I let him know that that was correct, and that's why I don't know, I hear that, and I just, want to keep pushing to make sure she gets her recognition. In 1896, both UNL men and women's basketball teams were created, but the women didn't become intercollegiate until 1898 when they started traveling to play other universities. She organized women's university basketball, becoming intercollegiate in 1898, and they were a championship team for 10 years. She was a player, and she's showing right there in the front row holding the basketball. And then later she coached and managed the team. The UNL female players made that shocking debut on the basketball court when they were wearing their bloomers, and it was really controversial. But because it was controversial, it intrigued people, so they came and watched them play. So the women's team was so popular that meant they were profitable. So they were known at times to lend money to the UNL men's basketball team so they could pay their debts. Louise earned a women's varsity basketball letter also. She won cycling awards for cycling 100 continuous miles in a 12-hour period, and a Rambler gold medal for riding 5,000 miles in 1 year. And it's so surprising to me that she could ride that far, and she's wearing, at that time, the latest cycling outfit, a skirt that's a little shorter, and she's wearing boots, a one-speed bike on dirt roads, and she would ride 100 miles in 1 day. She took up golf in her midlife and was the top-ranked golfer in the city of Lincoln and the state of Nebraska. She had championships from 1901 to 1927. However, she didn't win in 1924 because she didn't enter that year. Under the chancellorship of Canfield and Andrews, it was a golden era for the university for leadership and growth, and Louise had support. However, in 1908, Victorian values were making a comeback, and there was more concern over women's health from the medical profession. Chancellor Andrews left the university, and Samuel Avery, he was a professor of chemistry, took over as chancellor. He believed in the Victorian values and that women should have their place. Louise no longer had the support she previously experienced in high-level athletics in her career. Chancellor Avery hired a woman's physical education professor named Mabel Lee, who believed in the Victorian woman. Also in 1908, the University of Nebraska Board of Regents abolished intercollegiate sports for women due to social and medical health concerns. Women's intercollegiate sports did not make a comeback on campus until 1975. When Miss Mabel Lee interviewed for the position of head of the physical education, Lee impressed Chancellor Avery with her ladylike demeanor, her college training, her professional career resume, and her theories in physical education for females. When Pound discovered Lee's views on sports, Pound and Lee immediately butted heads. Pound and Lee were on extreme opposite ends of the spectrum, with Lee supporting mild play for all women and Pound supporting elite competition for the most gifted. After 1908, only mild physical education activities for women were endorsed by UNL, and Mabel Lee until 1972 with the passing of Title IX legislation. In 1975, women's intercollegiate sports returned to the UNL campus. Pound viewed Mabel's mild, tame theory of sports as sissy athletics. Pound and Lee never put their differences aside. Pound passed away in 1958 and never witnessed the passing of Title IX. Title IX represented her views and proved that her opinions of women's elite athletic competition was correct. Mabel Lee passed away in 1985. She lived to see her theory about elite intercollegiate sports for women crumble, but stood by her views to the very end. Some of Louise's athletic accomplishments are, in 1955, Pound was the first woman elected to the Nebraska Sports Hall of Fame. The Omaha World Herald has a list of the greatest 100 Nebraska athletes, and Louise remains on the list, currently at number 86. In 2018, the UNL Athletic Department recognized Pound's men's varsity letter in tennis and inducted Pound into the Nebraska Men's N Club, and she's the only female member in the exclusive club for lettering in men's tennis. It took her 124 years to get recognized for her accomplishments. In 2022, Pound was inducted into the UNL Athletics Hall of Fame. And she was honored, being inducted and she was a representative of the 50th anniversary of Title IX in 2022. And so they recognized her at a football game.
Varsity lettering in men's tennis in 1894, excelling not only on the tennis court, also on the golf course, taking home the first women's state golf championship. Pound was responsible for organizing and managing Nebraska's first women's basketball team. And outside of sports, for 5 decades, Pound served as an English professor at UNL. 50 years of Title IX and 80 years prior to that, Louise Pound began laying a foundation for more to become possible.
In 2022, I nominated Louise for the Nebraska State Hall of Fame. And what that means, if you win, you get a bronze bust in the Capitol. And it's a year-long campaign that you do to convince a committee of 7 that your person that you nominated is worthy of it. She came in second, so she didn't win, and they do this every 5 years. So I've already nominated and submitted the application again, and they'll start the year-long campaign in 2027. In 2023, I formed a committee of 3 women to work on Louise Pound projects while we wait for 2027 State Hall of Fame campaign. And the projects that we're currently working on to honor Louise, we've raised money for a bronze sculpture, which is currently being sculpted, and it's going to be erected on the north side of Louise Pound Hall on campus. And the work is currently in progress, and we're going to unveil it September 2026. And this is just a little sneak preview. That's her head that's been sculpted in clay, and that's the drawing will change a little bit. And then this is the sculptor. It's being sculpted in Elkhorn, Nebraska, and he's welding the bike together. That's going to form part of the sculpture. There are currently 10 bronze full-figured sculptures of men on the UNL campus, and Louise will be the first woman sculpture. And the significance with the bicycle was because of her championship efforts in cycling, and in the 1800s, the bicycle was a symbol of freedom for women. It was the first time they could go off on their own on a bicycle. We're also working on to put an electronic kiosk inside Louise Pound Hall so that people can see pictures of her and learn more about her. And we'd like to put a Nebraska historical marker on the place where their family home was located. And we want to endow a scholarship for a UNL female athlete in Louise's name. And then one project was recently completed. The Board of Regents has approved Louise to receive an honorary doctorate from UNL. And it's going to be presented in 2026, probably close to the time we're unveiling her sculpture. In 2019, it was the 150th anniversary celebration of the University of Nebraska, and I was asked to be a guest lecturer for the Chancellor's Lecture Series for Homecoming Weekend, and my topic was the history of school spirit and Louise Pound. For the lecture, I worked with David Martin. He's the director of the UNL's Innovation Campus, and I worked with 8 UNL engineering students to create a hologram of Louise Pound. And to get a better feel for Louise Pound, I conducted a simulated interview with her with the hologram. And her responses to the questions I asked her were actual quotes from Louise Pound. This is a video of previous Chancellor Ronnie Green, and this was at one of his tailgates before a football game, and they had the 8 inductees into the Hall of Fame for UNL athletics, and he had just introduced Louise Pound as one of the inductees, and then this is what he had to say.
You heard introduced a moment ago was one of our speakers during our 150th anniversary year. We had a lecture every month during that year about the history of the university, and she spoke on Louise Pound and about Louise Pound. We were in the State Museum in Elephant Hall, where the mammoths are, right? In that hall of the museum, and they blacked it out at one point in Debra's speech, and Louise Pound came to life through a hologram and spoke to us about what it was like to be here at the University of Nebraska at that time. The Johnny Carson School Center for Emerging Media Arts created that because it was really cool.
So I'm sharing with you some pictures. In the center was the student who dressed up and played Louise Pound in the hologram, and then the 2 outside pictures is a picture of the hologram that we were working on. And then this is a warehouse where we were working on the hologram, and that's me standing there, but there was a clear sheet of plastic in front of me, and that's what we used as a screen to do the hologram. And then this is during the lecture, so you'll get to see me interview Louise Pound as a hologram. And remember, her answers are quotes of hers. I would like to introduce to you Dr. Louise Pound.
Hello, please call me Miss Louise Pound.
Miss Pound, you were great at every sport you tried. What was your favorite sport?
I first played croquet at age 14. Once I mastered the game, I found it too tame. I discovered I enjoyed the physical challenge of a good tennis match, and soon tennis became my favorite sport.
Miss Pound, as a student, you helped organize the first UNL women's basketball team. You were a player as a student, and then a manager and a coach of the intercollegiate basketball team for 10 years. It was shocking for society to see a woman play the rough game of basketball. What are your thoughts on that?
Nothing much happens as a rule. Sometimes there's a dislocated wrist or dislocated collarbone, a black eye, a cut on the lip, broken finger, some little thing like that, but never saw anything too serious.
Miss Pound, I have heard that you were one of the first figure skaters in Lincoln. What would you like to tell me about your figure skating experience?
I bought myself a 10-cent book and from it practiced figure skating on ice. Of course I wasn't a Sonia Henney. My skirts were too long and cumbersome. But I had fun even though I was the only girl figure skater.
Miss Pound, I have heard that once you started wearing bifocal glasses that you had a harder time playing tennis at the level you were accustomed to. So you switched to golf and played for many years. Why did you stop playing golf?
I noticed that golfers were riding around in electric carts and the game had become sissier.
Thank you, Miss Pound. In conclusion, Louise Pound was a scholar and a championship athlete. She was a ball of energy, intense, confident, competitive, fun-loving, generous, and a woman ahead of her time. During her lifetime, she was recognized in the city, state, nationally, and internationally as a scholar and a renowned athlete. She could have had a career at any university, but she chose to stay in Nebraska her entire career. Louise Pound loved Nebraska, and she dedicated her life and career to the University of Nebraska, the pursuit of personal excellence, and most of all, a dedication to her students. Louise believed that everyone should strive to do their best be their best self in sports, academics, and in their personal life. She championed opportunities for women and led by example to show her contemporaries and female students what was possible. A quote about Pound from the UNL Library Archives stated this: Pound was always willing to jeopardize her own position for the greater good of justice. Doors to professional career opportunities were generally closed to women. The doors through which Emma Louise Pound passed were doors she opened for herself and for those who followed her. Louise passed away in 1958, but she had one final victory, the 1972 passing of Title IX, which represented the views of Louise and proved her opinion that women belonged in elite athletics and intercollegiate sports. I can't help but believe Louise isn't smiling down on the UNL women's sports program. I would love to know what she thinks about volleyball. Yeah. Louise and her siblings left behind no descendants. Her brother married, but they did not have children. Both Louise and Olivia were professional career women and never married. The family line of the incredible Pounds came to an end with their generation. I have made it my life's mission to make sure Louise will not be forgotten. On a clear day, December 2017, in mere seconds, an implosion erased the building on the UNL campus and potentially the memory of Louise Pound. The incomparable Louise Pound came close to being lost in time and her story forgotten. And fortunately, this tragedy was averted with the former College of Business Administration building becoming available and in need of a namesake. A match was made on June 2018 when the Board of Regents approved the building's new name as Louise Pound Hall. Louise's legacy and story will now live on upon the grounds of the University of Nebraska, where she devoted her life and career. Louise's loyalty and love for the university and Nebraska embodies the true spirit of Nebraska. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Somebody once asked me if Louise ever played at Wimbledon, and she didn't. When she beat the U.S. national champion and the Canadian champion, that was in a tournament in Chicago, and she happened to be there taking a class, so it was just convenient for her to play. But she didn't want a career in tennis. She did it for fun, and she wanted to be a professor, so she never pursued tennis.
Have you interviewed any of her students that had recollections about her as an instructor?
Oh, that's a good question. I have not. I mean, I found out about her too late to really be able to talk to her students. There was one man who was a professor at the university that was one of her students, but before I could interview him, he passed away. Yeah, I wish I would have known her. She's pretty amazing.
What kind of books did she write?
It was about Nebraska folklore.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about her relationship with Willa Cather,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not from Nebraska, and I've never heard of Willa Cather before I came here, but here she is huge. So why do you think it is that everybody knows Willa Cather but not Louise Pound?
That's a good question. Maybe it's because Willa had family, later that kept her memory alive. And just recently, Willa Cather got a bronze statue in Washington, D.C. I mean, and I guess a lot of people loved her books and her stories. And I don't know, she's just...
Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah, yes, that helped too. So, yeah, I think that's it. But hopefully more people will learn about Louise now with her sculpture, and keep my fingers crossed that she'll get in the capital.
First of all, I appreciate all the background work you've done to keep her memory alive. I didn't know this was happening, so that's wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's a passion and a love of mine, and yeah,
Well, that's what one thing Willa had, is her parents kept all of Willa's stuff.
yes,
And kept the house, and they had all of that stuff, and
yeah,
Louise's house got torn down.
that's right. I know, it's so interesting. Yeah. I was talking to the sculptor. Oh, that's an interesting story too. The sculptor his career, he was a veterinarian in Hastings. And he said that and he's been doing this now, well, he's been in Lincoln Elkhorn, about 7 years. And he said one day he saw a sculpture of a horse and he thought, that doesn't even look right. I think I could do better than that. And he started working with clay and he found out he could sculpt. And actually, if you've been to the arch here, they put, I think a year ago, they put bronze sculpture of a covered wagon and pioneers. He did all that. That's his work. And he's done work for the Henry Dorley Zoo, and he does horse sculptures. Yeah, he's amazing. And so Louise and her bicycle are now completely done. We went 2 weeks ago to look at it, and in early December, he's taken her out to Loveland, Colorado, where she'll be bronzed, and she'll be completed in July. But he was in his studio in Elkhorn, and John Cook walked in, and he was gonna talk to another resident artist at Main Street Studios in Elkhorn, because there's a woman that paints, and she has permission through the athletic department to do athletic work, and he's having his portrait and his horse painted. So we came into the studio, and the first studio on the left when you walk in is Dave, and there's Louise, and John Cook walked in and was looking at it, and so Dave was telling him all about Louise, and he was just totally fascinated. So they talked for quite a while about her. He knew nothing about her. And Dave said that all the people that come in to the studios, they come in and he tells them about Louise, and not one person has ever heard of her, but they love hearing her story. So.
Well, Willa Cather was known for her bicycling, so I would imagine that she and Louise bicycled together.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
And
Yeah.
stories about Willa talk about how that was such a freedom for women to be able to ride the bicycle and go places unescorted, as it were.
Yeah.
But what did Willa say about the brother that was so scandalous?
We don't know. We never did find out what he said, but they were very competitive, and she thought he was full of himself, and I can't imagine what it was to turn the whole family against her. But
I've always wondered why the schools around here had women's basketball in the early 1900s, and I know at Pleasanton that the girls were the bloomers, and suddenly there was no more basketball in high schools, and until, like you said, the 70s, and I didn't know about this movement about it wasn't Lady Bond.
yeah, it was considered really
You know,
brutal.
I always
and-
wondered what happened.
Yeah, that's what it
Thank you.
was.
Now
That's
I
what.
know.
Oh, you're welcome. I know, it's so shocking. That's amazing that it was allowed for a while and then, sorry, then just completely ended. So, but yeah, it's interesting.
Well, do we have any other questions?
What's the price of your books?
Oh, okay, and there is one chapter, chapter 4 is all about Louise in there, and they're $30, that includes tax. There's 154 pictures, mostly old pictures that are black and white, but then there's 16 pages of a color album in there, so.
Might be a great Christmas present.
Yeah, that's true, that's right around the corner.
Will you take my check?
Yes, absolutely.
Should we tell her it nonsense?
Should we what? How that amounts? Well, she'd know where to find me.
So one of the projects here at the Museum of the Christmas Trees, the volunteers here work as, we come every Monday afternoon. My wife won't say very much, but she was kind of helping put together, and we made a Christmas tree of women and women coaches in the Buffalo County area at the college and high school, and area athletes. And you might have to take a look at
I'll
that.
have to.
Overton or Elm Creek and Amherst just played for the state championship. And, anyway.
I love that, that's
Yeah.
great.
This lady right here is featured as one of the athletes.
Well, I went to school 1977 at UNL too, and so I was kind of curious, and I was on the track team. And so it was pretty new, the women's sports, and so when we would go to meets out of state, our coaches drove our vans. I mean, we didn't have anybody else to help us. And so I'm just curious, with of course, it was men and women in the cheer team.
Right.
And you probably went to out-of-state games, I would guess, and I was curious, how did that travel go for you?
Pretty much the same.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah,
Okay.
today, the cheer squad, they fly to all the games. We cheered, and they cheer for all the sports, and back then, we cheered just for football and basketball. And we went to all the away football games, and we would check out 2 university station wagons, and one of the guys would drive one, and our coach would drive the other. And we never got to spend the night. We'd drive down to Oklahoma, cheer, drive all the way back the same night. And the only time we got to fly was for bowl games, and went to the Cotton Bowl, Orange Bowl, and Liberty Bowl. Yeah.
I think one of our athletes even drove one night. I'm not sure that was kosher, but she did. Yeah, because the coaches are tired too. I mean, we're all tired coming home, yeah.
Yeah, and we only had one coach and 2 cars, so the guys would take turns driving. Yeah, times have changed a little. Yeah, I know that they were trying to field women's sports. I mean, and a girl that I went to college with, she was a basketball player in high school, and she played volleyball for Nebraska. She never played volleyball, but she got to play because she was an athlete, and they needed bodies on the team. And in 1978, I was walking across campus to go to school, and this man came up to me and asked me if I ever played basketball, and I said, no, we didn't have a girls' basketball team in high school, but he was the women's basketball coach. He was just trying to find a
He's looking for tall girls.
I know, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you very much for coming this
Thank
evening.
you.
And if you haven't already filled out one of these, please do.